context or if they have any interest while they're taking the survey, be able to watch the presentation from YouTube after the fact. So we have gone ahead and started the recording. So with that, I'll say good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Latimer. I'm a planning supervisor with DPZ. Thank you all for coming. Our Newtown Task Force was established this summer based on policies from HOCO by Design to evaluate and make recommendations on Newtown zoning for consideration during future planning efforts. And as our task force is just getting started, we're looking forward to hearing feedback from everyone on Newtown zoning for the task force to consider. And as I'm looking at our entry list, I see we have some Plan Howard Academy alumni joining us on the call today. So I wanted to extend a special thank you to our Plan Howard alumni for joining as well. And with that, I will hand it over to our consultant team, JMT, with Jennifer Ray for our presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, and welcome everyone this afternoon to hear more about some of the exciting things going on with the Newtown Task Force feedback and talking about zoning in Columbia. As you can see on the screen, this is the second of 2 meetings. Both meetings have the same exact information. So there was an in-person meeting last night that we had and welcomed individuals in, gave the same presentation, and are doing it today virtually to make sure that we can really reach out to as many people as possible. Because as Sarah noted, we really are at the point where we want to hear everybody's feedback. We want to have the survey filled in. There at the end of the presentation, there will be a second QR code that you can fill out a comment card as well. That's just general comments. And the course of this meeting will be very similar to last night's in-person meeting. I'll go through this presentation that you see on the screen in front of you. So I'll begin that. It's about a 15 to 20 minute presentation, and then we'll leave it open for specific questions, or if you want to gain some more information about any of the individual topics that I'll be addressing. This meeting goes until 2 p.m. At 1:05 p.m. I'll start a presentation a second time for anyone who may join during the process of this meeting, or if you would like anyone here just wants to hear it a second time, we'll go ahead and run that a second time, and then again open it up for questions or discussion on any of the additional items. When we get to that point, we'll do it with the raising hands through the WebEx feature, and we'll go over that at the very end. And I'll go through, and between the team, we'll call on people as they're raising their hand, but also making sure we get to each person so every voice can be heard before we start getting into repeat comments and questions or repeat speakers. So with that, again, let me welcome you for the presentation and begin with talking about, as Sarah mentioned, the Newtown Task Force was created through HOCO by Design, and really for through that Chapter 7, the Creative Task Force, put together with the recommendations of council members and then put into effect by the county executive. And on this next slide, what you can really see here as well is that the premise of this task force, it is not to make changes to the zoning, but it is to evaluate everything that's within that section 125 within Howard County zoning, which falls under the Newtown zoning district, and to review everything and evaluate, does this make sense? Should we continue it? Should we strengthen it? Should we change it? But even through that, this task force is evaluating and making recommendations back to Howard County and Department of Planning and Zoning, and everything will go through the normal and the regular zoning recommendations and any revisions at that time. So I want to be very clear on that this task force is analyzing and evaluating and making recommendations. So just to make sure everybody is on the same page as we look at this, the area we're talking about and what you see on your screen is a map of Howard County. And you can see that red outline that shows up, and that is Columbia. And often we're referring to Columbia and Newtown District as relatively the same because it's generally the same region. So what you can see within that red outline on the map here, which is showing the Columbia boundary, everything that's in this darker gray is what is actually part of the Newtown District zoning and part of that section 125 that's being reviewed. So it is not all of Columbia, but that gives you that general idea of where it's located. And of course, then we also have the Newtown Columbia boundary map. And what this really identifies is the different villages, the points of interest within that Newtown area. So one of the activities that we did during last night's meeting and want to extend for today as well is for individuals to, as you're comfortable, to go ahead and note within the chat function or the Q&A function of where you are located, what village you are coming from today. And the reason we're asking that information is we are doing a concentrated effort, even with the survey as well, is to make sure that we really are reaching out and that all villages are being represented and all people are being represented. So you can go ahead and add that into the chat at this time of what village or non-village as you would like to put in and add into the chat. So again, this just gives an idea and a reference point of the different villages that come within the Columbia area and that overlap with the Newtown zoning district as well. So one of the things that is unique with the Newtown district zoning is the density requirements. And what this map and this slide is really showing is the idea of what that density is and what type it is. So Newtown zoning district was really made up with that maximum. And as you're looking at this slide, you can see this max density. So the total district having a max density of the 2.5 units per acre. And this is what that approved density is to date. So within single family low density, single family medium density, you can see what the maximum is permitted by the Newtown zoning district, and then where we are today of that approved density. So the maximum, for example, of a single family low density is two units per acre, and currently we are at the 1.84 units per acre. And likewise, this is where you can come through and see where there is the capacity for additional infill development or capacity for additional density. So it's really looking, as you look through this chart, you can really see where that single family medium density has that largest gap between the maximum and where we are today. And then apartment, single family attached, apartment, multifamily, where that is as far as what is permissible and then what is approved to date. Of course, there's employment, open space, which is very important, and one of the things that was talked about and really recognized as a benefit in this area. And again, as I noted, that total maximum density permitted is 2.5 and currently at 2.4239. So that was just to give an idea of, what is this Newtown? What is the task force? What does that density look like? This project process has an overall schedule and a timeline. We really started this process, well, it's truly started with the HOCO by design and putting in there that recommendation for having this task force. The project itself began in May of this year and started with stakeholder meetings. So having one-on-one conversations with each of the 21 task force members, as well as other individuals within the community to just talk about key things. What do you really appreciate? What are concerns? Those types of topics. That information was then brought together and we had the kickoff meeting with the task force in June earlier in this summer. And that was introducing everybody and really going over everything that this task force was going to be doing. We started off with what was the visioning sessions, and I'll talk about those in a little bit here as well. And then where we moved into is this P-set analysis. And I'll give some more description of what is P-set and what does that look like. And that is truly where we are today. So we are here with our public meeting, the public survey, in the middle of this P-set analysis process. So I do want to, the benefit of today is hearing all of the questions from last night. We have not yet moved into creating or developing recommendations. We're still going through this analysis component, and the recommendations portion will be in future meetings. This project will then, as we develop recommendations, you can see that overlap with the draft report because it is an iterative process of developing the recommendations, putting that draft report together, and you'll see that next public meeting is really as that draft report is still coming together because this is very much driven by the members of the task force and by the community, and each of you having, review of all these documents and ensuring that this is representative of the activities and the work that's taking place. The anticipation is the final report and presentation will go to the county next May. So with that, a little bit on the background information of how we got to be where we are today, how Columbia came to be. I know many of you have shared with me, and many who I see some familiar names online as well, have shared with me your own relationships you've had with Jim Rouse, and knowing that Jim Rouse was there who established the 4 goals for Columbia. And those are listed on the screen: to build a complete city, to respect the land, to provide for the growth of the people, and to make a profit. And I share each time I show this picture. This is actually a display that is on the 2nd floor at the American Visionary Arts Museum in downtown Baltimore. And there's an entire display about Columbia, about Jim Rouse, about what he brought in this planned community. And really, it's summed up well with this quote that's saying, people, we are affected by our environment, and looking at that balance, looking at what we can do to ensure that the space and place of where we are is for the best of all of our abilities. So that really created then the new town zoning district code. As I mentioned before, it is section 125 of the zoning code for Howard County. It was created in 1965 and is really the classification for Columbia. And if you think back to that map, the majority of Columbia, there are pieces outside of it, but the majority of Columbia as that unincorporated planned community. It was initially created with 13,690 acres and currently at 14,272 acres. And why I share those numbers and the very specific numbers, it really goes back to when we think about that slide earlier on about the maximum density cap is measured per acre. So it's very important to have those exact numbers to know exactly where we are, the number of acres, and how much can be developed and put onto this space. And one of the great things, the new town zoning really regulates the land use at the neighborhood level. And that's something that's unique and different than other zoning districts that new town zoning district allows, that it's done at the neighborhood level. Through this process, the team has reviewed and evaluated other locations of new town planned communities. And there are 3 in particular that have been case studies that have been brought forward to the task force. So a lot of research has gone in by the county as well as the JMT team, and really looking in depth with Montgomery Village, Maryland, Greenbelt, Maryland, and Reston, Virginia. And these 3 case studies were each identified. They're generally within the same region and all have generally that same age to them, so that some of the challenges and questions that we may see or face here with the Columbia and Howard County New Town Zoning District, we can look at these other studies and identify, did they have these challenges already? How are they handling them? What have they changed as we're going through the process, so we can learn from others who might have already paved the way or have some of that communication as well. So as I mentioned before with the visioning meetings, we did start, and you can see on the bottom that our June and July meetings was really about that vision and setting the vision. So as I mentioned, we had those meet and greets. All the stakeholders, we identified and asked the questions of what are the top 3 things that people appreciate about Columbia, and what are the top concerns people have for Columbia, and ultimately, what's that vision for the future? If you had your magic wand and look 10, 20, 30, 50 years, what does Columbia of the future look like? The purpose of this exercise was not to create a new vision. Howard County and HOCO by Design has a vision in the documents. Columbia Association has a document as well with a vision. What it was really to do was to develop a vision for the task force by which all recommendations that the task force is going to be developing can be reviewed and measured against. And so that was the purpose of this, identifying what are the challenges, what are the benefits, what do we want the future to look like. And so again, noting that where we are, we're still in the middle of this prior to making recommendations and still doing that analysis, but really going back to that vision each time. What that vision is that the task force developed and the vision for the new town recommendations is really a compilation of ideas. And you can read these on the screen of people and community, diversity and inclusivity, open space and green space, aid in maintaining the spirit of Columbia. Embrace the future while honoring the values that Columbia was based upon. Columbia is a place that needs to value its uniqueness based on its history. So a lot in this vision is really tying the history, the character, and maintaining that integrity while still being forward thinking and forward looking and maintaining that concept of being that this space, this place is about inclusivity, it's about diversity, it's about bringing all people together and maintaining that balance between the built and the green space community. So I want to move to that next phase. We talked about the visioning phase first, and really where we are today is it's called PSET, and it stands for Preserve, Strengthen, Enhance, and Transform. And these are the meetings that we are currently in. We had the first one in September, and the next task force within the PSET analysis grouping of meetings happens 1 week from today at task force meeting number 4, and then we'll continue into November. So what we're really doing at this time is reviewing all of those major elements of the zoning code. In September, we identified the major discussion elements, and that really came from all of the meet and greets, the hearing from the task force members, hearing from stakeholders, providing that list that the county has of different issues or challenges or questions that have come up, and preparing that holistically so that we can then start really dissecting into each of them. So that was discussed in September. And since then, what we're really doing is looking at each of those elements individually. We're identifying the relevant case study information, and then we are identifying within that, should there be a recommendation to preserve it as it is, to strengthen what the zoning code says, to enhance it, or to transform it altogether. And at this stage of where we are now, we are simply identifying what action should take place next. Once we get into the developing recommendations and into that next stage, that's where we'll actually dig into what should that recommendation look like. And the task force members will be developing that recommendation based on, at this time, whether the consensus was that we're strengthening, we're preserving, we're strengthening, we're enhancing, or we're transforming. So just a little bit of what those terms mean, because certainly they could take on different meanings from different individuals. So preserve is really protect and maintain, preserving what matters most. So that gets back to that historical context. Strengthen says it's already there, but let's strengthening what already works. Enhancing is we want something to be more robust than it is today. So enhancing what already exists, building in more robustness to it. And then finally, areas to transform. So this is looking at areas that they do need to evolve. They do need to evolve. So transforming it so that evolution can happen. And you can see with that arrow, the less change and lower intensity up to the more change and greater intensity. So walking through then, so what are these key elements? Now, this is not a finite list. This is that list that came from the conversations with the task force members, with stakeholders, with what the county has collected over time as they've had conversations. And what we focused in on, and the reason for the different colors, is their different meetings. So our September meeting, which is represented in brown on the screen, really focused in on, should we create another new town district within the county? So currently section 125 states that this is what's needed for creating a new town district, and also talking about credited open space. Our next meeting, which is next Tuesday, will touch on what is shown in green, of reviewing the original petitioner role, looking at the moderate income housing unit regulations, managing density caps, And the last meeting that is within the PSET analysis, which will focus in on what is shown in blue on the screen, of just talking about the overall Newtown district structure, potentially redefining what apartment land use looks like, talking about expansion of uses, materials, any design guidance that might be recommended, and an overall simplification. Should there be a simplification, and what are the recommendations for simplification of the regulations and processes? So with that, what we really want to do, and the reason of having these meetings, is one, to share where we are in this process and where the task force is in this process. But we also really want to hear from everyone. There is a survey that is out currently. There's already been over 100 participants, and we really want to make sure that we are hearing from as many people as possible. So first of all, if you have already taken the survey, thank you so much for doing so. Please feel free to take the link and forward it on to your neighbors, to your colleagues, to other individuals, to village boards. Just get that word out there, because we want as many people as possible to fill the survey out. The information from the survey is going to go back to the task force. We'll have some of it at our next meeting. The survey doesn't close till November 3rd, so it's actually after the next meeting. But that information is going to be very useful for the task force members to then also have what it is other community members are thinking on these different elements to help guide some of those conversations. And so the other piece is stay tuned. Of course, everybody is welcome to attend a task force meeting. There's always opportunities there to just hear and listen to what's going on, but we will have that second public meeting as well, the recommendations public meeting in the spring of 2026. And this very last slide is, again, the survey link and that survey QR code is shown on the right side of the screen. And then there is a second QR code shown on the left side of the screen, and that is a digital comment form. So if you have comments or questions or want to share ideas about anything within what this Newtown Task Force is doing and just essentially free writing that, that's what that comment form is. It's about this meeting and the materials, whereas the survey is really identified to hit specific issues and collect those data points to assist the Newtown Task Force. So that concludes the presentation. I want to thank everybody very much for being a part of the presentation. And I'll go back. I will leave this slide up so that you can hit QR codes at any time for either the survey or the comment form, and we will open for questions. And Sarah and Jeff will be assisting in helping identify and read off the questions, as well as answering as based on what we need.
So I saw one question come through the chat from Larry Schoen about open space crediting and what is open space crediting. So I'm happy to provide a little context to that, of course. So credited open space in Newtown zoning, one thing that's special about our Newtown district is that there's required minimums and maximums for each of the land uses. So for commercial uses, for instance, there's a 2% minimum commercial land use across all of the Newtown district. And for open space, there's a 36% minimum. So the process that the Newtown goes through is on our in the final development plans, or what's like a neighborhood plan in Newtown. We have these designated open space areas, and they're measured out, and there's credited acreage associated with each of those areas, so that we have credited the open space and counted it to make sure it counts towards that 36% for the entire Newtown district. So that's what credited open space means. And I think I also saw a hand up from Lynn, so I will go ahead and request unmute. Oh, never mind, lowered hand. But if anyone has any other comments or questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a 2 or 3 part question. One is, does the current process in any way impact any of the 10 villages, in particular town center? So that's one question. Second question is, has Howard County's Department of Planning and Zoning made any recommendations, or does it contemplate making any recommendations that will impact any of the 10 villages, including town center?
So it was the 2 parts, or did you say 3 parts? Does anything so far impact the 10 villages or town centers individually? And are there recommendations specific to any village or town
Yeah,
center?
will the Department of Planning and Zoning be making any recommendations for any of the 10 villages, especially town center, as part of the new town zoning process?
And I can, Sarah, if you'd like, I can start and then you can add in at the end.
Sure, that'd be great.
So currently where we are in the process is we are just evaluating the zoning code as a whole. It is not at this time, we have not talked about anything by particular village. It's just been talking about it holistically within the entire district and talking about that section 125 as a district. And so as we talk about open space is, something that Sarah had provided a little bit more context to before, that's something we did discuss during the September meeting, the credited open space. And so that's something as we had talked about it, it was again, district-wide, and we've been looking at everything district-wide. From this particular process, the recommendations are coming from, will be developed by the task force, and that will then go to the Department of Planning and Zoning and then be evaluative of what are those next steps. So again, to date, we're not yet at that point of developing recommendations. We're still in that analysis component of should it change? How should it change? As far as does it just need to be strengthened, enhanced, or completely reevaluated and transformed? And then we'll get into what does that actually mean later. So each of those questions that we hit September, October, November, and I showed in the different colored text, we'll be coming back to each of those questions and identifying based on, the conversation, and I'll use the open space again, of looking at that being potentially strengthened with some of the language in there. So then when we get into those recommendations meetings, beginning with December, January timeframe, we'll then identify, okay, so if we said we think it should be strengthened, now what does that look like? But it's been really on the district, the Newtown district level. And so I'll let Sarah, if there's any additional information that you would like to provide.
Oh, I think that answered it perfectly.
So, and again, this is really time for each of you to ask questions and essentially comparing it to the in-person meeting. This is really that time of more or less the one-on-one discussion. So if there is a particular board or particular information point that you would like to go back and see again, we can certainly go back to that slide and have some further conversation.
I think I see a raised hand from Sharon. And I've sent a request for you to unmute. So if you have a question, feel free to go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Sorry, I was having difficulty unmuting. My question relates to the slide you showed with the density figures. And I was wondering if the figures that you included for the current numbers included all of the new housing units that will be getting over here on the west side of Columbia. We've turned many townhouse developments into what will be apartment buildings, I think doubling the number of units that we had in those locations. That's not including the Patuxent Commons apartment building. And I think, as you're aware, we're already having a situation with overcrowding in our schools over on this side of Columbia. So I'm a little concerned if those figures are actually current and include the apartment buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to answer that. So this is the current preliminary development plan, which includes all of the currently allowed projects in the pipeline under Newtown. So I can't speak to any specific project, but if it has gone through the preliminary development plan amendment process, particularly I know a few of the enterprise housing projects have gone through the preliminary development plan process, and those are included in these figures.
Okay, thank you.
Steve Freedom has his hand raised.
I just had a question. I don't understand why we're looking at Newtown when it's part of the rest of the county. I mean, to the extent that we need more apartment or single family or anything else, why wouldn't that apply to the whole county? Why are we just putting it in Columbia? Why do they get all the goodies and the rest of the county doesn't get to have that?
So Sarah, I don't know if you wanted to take this
Sure.
first or.
Sure, happy to jump in. So the Newtown Task Force, and Jennifer, if you want to go back to our HOCO by Design page, that would be a helpful reference, was a policy established in HOCO by Design in our Quality by Design chapter that called for the county to create a task force that is appointed by county council and the county executive to evaluate and make recommendations on how to carry forward Newtown's planned community framework, which is specific to zoning regulations and section 125. So the task force is really, while they might not be suggesting large land use changes for Newtown, we're looking at evaluating and making recommendations for future consideration in the zoning regulations for Newtown as part of that policy.
Right. It seems to me it's being steered toward Columbia, and I really think it needs to be steered toward the whole county and not just Columbia. I mean, I think the game that's being played is, okay, that 2.5 goes to 2.8 or something, and that's fine, but I think it should go to the whole county, not just Columbia.
Thank you for your input.
So one thing, if I can just, this is Kristen O'Connor from the planning department. One thing, Steve, is that Newtown is only found in Columbia. So the Newtown zone specific to the directive out of the general plan was to look at Newtown zoning. So section 125 is solely Newtown zoning. And I appreciate your comment about we should be looking countywide, but this specific, very specific recommendation in the general plan was to look at Newtown, Columbia. So that's why we're here today, specifically on this particular project.
But over the years, there's always been a big divide between Columbia, and I'm from before Columbia. So there's in Columbia, then outside of Columbia. And here we go again. We're dividing the county up again. It's almost like a national politics that's going right now. It's them and us. And I don't think it should be that way. I think it should be countywide. And so I understand the task force had that. I don't know why they would separate that out.
I'll just mention too, Jeff Delmonico, Planning and Zoning as well. I would just mention, the reason I think Newtown is being looked at is mainly because of its very unique process. And Section 125, the Newtown zoning district, it's a lot of how it was developed back in the 1960s by Jim Rouse. So I think the intent is just to assess the regulations as they are currently and determine whether or not there's any improvements, if there's any aspect to it that's antiquated, and whether or not there should be an element that should be included to improve it or make adjustments. That's more or less, I think, what the ask of the task force.
So I think back then there was, and originally, remember, I think the density for Columbia was 2 units per acre for 14,000 acres. By the way, it was my uncle that put Columbia together. He was the guy who assembled all of Columbia. for Jim Rouse. And the deal was it was 2 units per acre, and then that just bumped up by another half a unit per acre, no big deal. Well, half a unit per acre times 14,000 units, 14,000 acres is a lot of density. And so I am concerned that's the same game that's being played here. We're just going to go ahead and bump that up. It'll look like nothing, but it's a huge increase in density. And once again, why would Columbia get that and the rest of the county not? And I guess I feel pretty strongly about that, in case you can't tell.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you, Steve. I'm seeing another hand up from Jasmine. Jasmine, I've gone ahead and requested unmute. Let me know if you're having any trouble with your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to know, with the plan for the Columbia Gateway Innovation District, occurring, is that being considered, during this task force process and analysis?
Sure, great question. So you'll see Jennifer's got a map up here, and the majority of the Gateway Innovation District boundaries are outside of Newtown zoning, in fact. So while the master plan is occurring near Newtown District, the majority of the plan is outside of those districts. So we're really focusing on Section 125 of the zoning regulations, which is within the Newtown Columbia District itself. I'll let anyone else add on if they'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. And the only thing I went back one more slide just to identify again, that was the density map I just had up, but that's why we showed this map as well, because it's often talked about as the Columbia area, or, Columbia and Newtown zoning kind of hand in hand. They're not identical to each other. So what is Columbia is not completely the Newtown zoning district. And so that's where, as you can see in this map, the dark shades are what is actually the Newtown zoning district. And those are the only things that we are looking at through this task force, is what's impacted by that section 125, which is specifically the Newtown zoning district of the zoning code. So you can even see in here, there's some, and hopefully you're able to see my arrow as it's coming through, but there's some like pieces in the middle that are not actually even part of the Newtown zoning district as well. So it's a great question, because you really have to look at everything overlapped on top of each other.
And can I ask a follow-up question to that? Do you know, I don't know the history of how the boundary was decided for Newtown, but do you know why it included those dark spaces and not the those pockets in the middle?
Great question.
I was gonna say, I actually don't have the history of each of those. So Sarah or Jeff, as you do.
Sure. So Jim Rouse was the original developer for Columbia. So it really had to do with what land he was able to acquire in the original petition for establishing this master plan community. So, there's a lot of stories of Jim Rouse working to acquire piece by piece 13,000 or so acres in the 1950s and 60s before he came to the county with this plan for Newtown Columbia. So that's why it might look a little bit Swiss cheese, as some people might describe it.
Just to build on that, this is Kristen from the county. Those farms or properties that were not that he was not able to acquire could have been large farm pieces or parcels that just folks did not want to sell. Those would be the out parcels that you see in the white or the lighter color that just didn't make it into and get acquired for Newtown zoning. So just to build on that. So thank you all for that background.
I was here. Hopefully you're going to start going in parcel by parcel of the story. So yes, my apologies. I'm well aware of Jim Rouse and how he acquired it, but I wasn't, I was thinking more on the parcel by parcel. I'm like, no, I don't know all the history of each one.
I'm sure it would be fascinating if I knew it.
Yes. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. And next hand I see raised is Gerald. Gerald, I've sent a request through. Hopefully that comes through.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just a definition, when you use the term district, what does that mean? What is a district?
That's a great question. So Howard County is our zoning regulations, or the regulations that regulate land use and density for the county, are broken up into different districts. So Newtown is in Columbia is one of our zoning districts, and that's that dark
Okay.
blue Swiss cheese area you're seeing on the map.
Okay, so the district we're talking about is the Newtown.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Joel has a hand raised.
Hello.
Hello.
Regarding some of the earlier comments from Sharon and some other people regarding the density cap, first of all, why do you mislead people who don't know that downtown was carved out from that? So those densities are well over the density cap. I believe we shouldn't have another Newtown developed, and that was discussed at the last task force meeting because there's nowhere to put it. And I realize I'd like to have the history from the county of how the PGCC was developed as kind of a Newtown light, probably because the Mangione family wanted their development, didn't have enough space to do a whole new town, so they took the parts they liked for a golf course community. It's more likely, perhaps, that you could get another golf course community. I don't even know where that would go in the cap. But the problem really is to deal with the redevelopment, which was acknowledged in the Office of Law and incorporated in zoning case 1031 of how to amend the PDP. And why do we keep amending that map, which my answer to the task force homework assignment from a few weeks ago, months ago, was it in 50 years, do you want to have 110, 20-year-old PDP map that you're keeping track of in the corner with the density, which again, they've been carved out for downtown anyway. And the fact that the allocation include the Oakland Mills gas station, Exxon site has housing allocations that somehow have to be removed by the zoning board and may end up in Long Reach, and there's no procedure for actually doing that. And how does DPZ in the county going to go about doing that when we don't currently have any rules? And I guess the last couple things, covenants was not on your list of topics. That was included in the MOU with the county, with Howard Hughes. And from the documents I got from the administration, it fell apart over financing discussion between CA and Howard Hughes. So other people have raised the overlapping issue of the covenants that go along with the PDP and the zoning. And the county's involved in that, and how to create a quasi governmental corporation if CA is not the entity to go about getting that transfer from Howard Hughes. That needs to be part of the topic. And is anybody going to add that to the list? And I guess last was the problem with density cap again with the ADU discussion, and the answer, I'm still waiting from Director Eisenberg. That yes, apparently the ADUs aren't going to count for the caps, so we can keep adding those. But to say that simplifying the structure of this, which Mary Kay Siggety told the zoning board after she was no longer in the council, Newtown zoning is hard. why do we make it so complicated by not spelling out the rules, particularly for the ADUs that I've discussed last week? To put that in there, to explain all the rules about how to go about doing that, because it is not like a deck. A deck, nobody but the neighbors are probably going to care about a deck. The only similarity is that an ADU and a deck are both structures, but an SDP amendment's needed for a deck and an FDP amendment is needed for an ADU, as was done in Harper's Choice a couple years ago. So that's what's so complicated, and you need to put those topics, I think, on the list to bring to the council to form the whole structure of the whole PDP and the amendments, the ADUs and the covenants and all that. So that's a mouthful, but are any of those capable of being added?
Added as discussion points for the task force. That is, as I mentioned.
Well, particularly the covenants, that other members have brought that up, I know. And again, the county's already raised that in the MOU, and I think it might be in the CA's documents that you have.
Going to our total list here. So as I mentioned before with this list, this is not a finite list. There are other elements that can be added and discussed as we're going through as a task force sees fit and as information is coming through from the survey. As far as, and we have discussed during the task force meeting specifically regarding the covenants, that some of those, some might be pertinent, but not all of them are going to be pertinent to come under the section 125 zoning specifically. And so that's something that while it's a part of, you know, a property that exists within the Newtown zoning district, it might not be specific to the overall process and what we're looking at in some of those other elements.
All right, because part of the problem when I hear the pushback about the covenants or private thing, they're mentioned in different ways in the FDPs. And once the county's made that for whatever that FDP maintenance agreement and to get certain approvals of things, it seems that that needs to be those covenants and maintenance agreements and things that overlap with the Howard Hughes architecture control all need to be part of this reform discussion.
And there are things that will continue to come forward within these other elements as well. So even as we discussed at the next task force meeting of reviewing the original petitioner role and how that looks and what's incorporated in and a part of that, there are so many pieces that fall within some of these other elements as well. So as you mentioned, with ADUs, and there is the moderate income housing unit regulations, just as we're talking about, what does that mean? Those are specific regulations. How does ADU fall within that? What does all of this look like? So there are things that will be offshoots of these elements for discussion as well at the task force meetings.
All right, well, make sure that the PDP amendment process is discussed, because
and that's
we got the Office of Laws Analysis. It's in 1031M, where the zoning board decided they had inherent authority to amend the PDP. It seems that's what needs to be codified, rather than every petitioner arguing about what the previous zoning board cases say, and they keep arguing, well, if you don't do it, it's impermissible change of mind doctrine. It'd be really helpful to authorize how to amend the PDP.
Great. And those are topics as well. And that's why I also brought this list up with the simplification of regulations and processes. So that is definitely how all of this will come together and what does it look like. That will all be part of those discussions as well under that, what are the regulations? What is the process? What does that look like? How do we change that? Do we change that? Do we enhance it? Do we strengthen it? Do we transform it? So thank you, Joel, because those are great points, and definitely as we get to these different elements during the task force meetings, we definitely want to go through not just that, these are a few words on a slide that represent a very large discussion to be had and a lot of different ways to look at it. So definitely appreciate you bringing that up now, and certainly as we are digging in on each of these at the task force meetings, we'll be hitting on many of these points. And for those not on, and I'll scroll down to the last slide, for those not on the task force, because those task force meetings are really as task force members are discussing, for those not on and having thoughts and wanting to share information about that, I do encourage you as well to fill out the comment form and the digital comment form and add that information in too. Thank you.
Joel, I'm seeing another hand from Sharon. Sharon.
Hello.
Yep.
Hi again. Can
Hi.
you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yes. we got
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say how much I appreciate all of the previous speakers' comments, and I do agree with their concerns. And thank you, Joel, for all the great things that you pointed out. I do want to go back to the density again, because, I think that's really what is the crux of concerns here. And when you look at that map of Newtown, to me, one of the things that really stands out when I look at that Swiss cheese picture is you're focusing on the density of what, like, I guess our infrastructure and land can support and what the zoning codes currently say. But you're not talking about all those white areas. So, for example, I mentioned all of the townhouse communities that are being converted into twice the amount of units over here in apartment buildings, but that didn't include the Patuxent Commons apartment building. It doesn't include what's going on downtown. It doesn't include Gateway. I don't think it included Sewell's Orchard. You don't know how many housing units are going to be added in the redevelopment of Long Reach. It seems like there's a constant battle over what's going on at the Hickory Ridge Village Center. And as Joel now brings up, we have this discussion that's really just starting on ADUs, which kind of at this point almost seem to be like an open-ended thing. Like I don't think anybody's talked about limitations on ADUs at all. So I'm really, really concerned that you're focusing on these little areas and what you feel they can support, but without having really done like traffic studies and studies for our schools and parking and the hospital and just really how much density one area can support. I really think you have to take what's going on in all of those other areas into consideration when you're making your decisions for any new zoning. So thanks for letting me share that thought, really more than a question, and I will definitely be filling out comments to send in.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for that thought. And the only thing I really want to share on that is, as you're saying, I just want to come back to that. It's really, this is the work of the task force members. And so that is a great point. One of the things that, as I mentioned before, we will be sharing the outcome of these public meetings as the comment forms, as well as that survey. The survey being really getting into the specific issues, the comment form being everything else as well. So that's going to come back to the task force members to really dig in and then identify any additional elements or additional considerations. So thank you for that. And I will go back to the comment, the last slide, so that QR code is up and everybody can, if you haven't yet had a chance to scan it, you can do so.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, I'll just add that, the density question is, as you mentioned, a discussion point for our task force members to discuss whether they'd like to preserve that, strengthen it, enhance it, or transform it for the future. So this is really, an element that our task force members will be taking forward into their recommendations, which will be considered in a potential future wider comprehensive rezoning effort for the entire county, which of course would include much more studies, public engagement, and a county council approval process as well. I also see a hand raised from Gerald.
Yes, I moved to Columbia in 1969. I'm in the same townhouse, and I'm 83, so I'm very involved in a lot of the senior centers, the 50+ centers, and all of us in these centers, you know, are some of my neighbors moved away to be near their children who moved away, but most of the people I hang out with say I can't imagine living anywhere else. So there's a deep connection to this new town. Well, one of the things that I notice is people have more cars than they originally did. And there are cars, like in my townhouse space, there were reserved 2 parking spaces for each unit. Now there are cars not only parked in those units, but across the street along the grass. And to what extent is the issue of traffic being addressed? Because just when I go from one side of the Columbia to another, there are long lines. So is traffic a consideration?
So as a part of what this process is doing, it's anecdotally a consideration. And I say that in the fact of everybody is bringing it's 21 members on the task force, different villages, different experiences, different length of time within living within this area. And so we are looking at anecdotally, what are the things in the analysis of should it stay the same, should it change? And then providing those recommendations. As Sarah noted, that next phase really is those recommendations are not that it's definitely going to happen. Part of those recommendations could be maybe it is that density cap gets increased. And what does that look like from a traffic perspective? What does that look like from a utility perspective? The capacity of utilities, the capacity of the schools, all of that. So that recommendation, that next step is really where things such as that would then be taking place.
Okay, thank you.
So just to time check, this is Kristen. It is the top of the hour. So did we want to roll back through for the new folks that have joined us? And folks that have stayed can stay on. Please stay on and contribute to the Q&A at the end. But we are going to, as we advertise, run through the presentation right now and then get back to Q&A at the end. So
Absolutely. And you're all getting the spoiler alerts as I go backwards. So Sarah, did you want to do another quick intro for any of the newcomers?
Happy to welcome everybody who's joined recently. My name is Sarah Latimer. I'm a planning supervisor with the Department of Planning and Zoning here. Thank you all so much for coming. Our Newtown Task Force was established this summer based on policies from POCO by Design to evaluate and make recommendations on Newtown zoning for consideration during any future planning efforts. And as our task force is just getting started, we're really looking forward to hearing feedback from everyone on Newtown zoning for the task force to consider when they develop their recommendations. I still see a few Plan Howard alum on here as well. So a special shout out to our Plan Howard alum for joining the meeting as well. And with that, I will pass it off to our consultant team with Jennifer Wright.
Thank you. So for those who have stayed on for the whole duration, you get to hear this presentation a second time. For those who joined either while we were going through some questions and comments, or brand new at the top of the hour, this is what we're doing is providing a presentation and really thanking you for taking the time today to be a part of this and be a part of this process and provide all of the feedback, the comments, the questions. They're all very welcome and very much necessary as a part of this whole process. As you can see on the screen there, this is one of 2 meetings. So yesterday there was an in-person meeting that was the same materials as we're going over now. And then we are doing this through the WebEx. Both last night as well as today, we started with the presentation, and then, for last night, had the boards around the room and opened it up for people to go and have one-on-one discussions at the boards. So today, this is the second presentation. After I'm done going through this about 15-minute or so presentation, we'll open it up for questions, comments, anything you'd like to share related to this project and this project process. And we'll do that basically by having you either raise your hand or add in a comment or a question into the chat. At that time, Sarah will be able to unmute you. You'll be able to have that conversation, and we'll be going through for those who have not yet had a chance to speak first, and then allowing others as they have additional comments or questions to come back and speak again. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. As Sarah mentioned, this task force really it came about through the HOCO by Design process. What you see on the screen is from Chapter 7. You can see the reference here right on the screen, that through HOCO by Design, there was the recommendation of having a task force come together and really look at what is known as a Section 125 within the Howard County Zoning Code that is pertinent to the Newtown zoning district. There is an executive order, actually 2 executive orders to put in place a total of 21 task force members that came as recommendations from council members and then put into place by the county executive. And what's really important to note through this is this task force is charged with evaluating everything that's within that Section 125, looking at some major elements, but really looking through all of it, analyzing it to identify, what changes might need to happen or how it stays the same, and then providing those recommendations. So this task force is not making changes. They're the ones that are making the recommendations that then go back to the Department of Planning and Zoning and get rolled into an overall zoning process. So I do want to call that out because it is very important to note that distinction of the making recommendations is what the task force is doing for this project purpose. The location map you see on your screen is really to help identify really where we are. So of course, Howard County, that's the large map. You can see within this red outline, this is the boundary of Columbia. And what we're talking about is what's within that Newtown zoning district. So those items that are colored in this dark gray shade, that is the actual what's governed by that Section 125 of the zoning code within that Newtown zoning. And so that's just a reference to the area. And we've had questions come up of things that are actually outside might be referred to as Columbia. And often you'll hear even through the task force, those names going kind of hand in hand, but there are variations. So we want to point that out. The next slide really gets into what's within the Newtown Columbia area and defines it by what are the villages and what are the points of interest. And so as we asked for individuals who attended in person last night, and we asked during the earlier presentation, we do want to hear where folks are coming from, what villages you're coming from. So if you want to go ahead and add that into the chat, that would be fantastic. One of the reasons for that point of information is we're really working to make sure that every village is represented, all voices are heard, and if we're not seeing enough feedback from any one particular area, we really want to identify that so that we can do some additional outreach efforts there for both this effort as well as the online survey effort. So go ahead and feel free to add in the chat what village you are with, and we will add that into our point of information and a data point for ourselves. This next map really gets into with Newtown zoning district that what the density looks like for that. And so what you're looking at here with the map are the different colors represent the different type of land use. But what's important to note is in this max density column. So that is based on section 125 of the Howard County zoning regulations specific to Newtown zoning. And it talks about that the total Newtown district has a max density of the 2.5 units per acre. This is the approved, this last column is the approved density, and it identifies that there is a nominal amount that can still be put into the Newtown district, but the max being 2.5 and currently at the 2.4239. And so each of the different types of use also has their own maximum density. So all of that combined is what gets to that 2.5. So when you look at, say, the single family low density, the maximum is 2, and the approved density there to date is the 1.8404. Just to give an idea, and of course that goes through the single family low and medium, the different types of apartments, employment, and open space. And so just for a point of reference, that single family medium density is what really has that largest gap between the maximum density and then what's already the approved density in here. So just want to show that for some relative relationship understanding of what that maximum density looks like, how that came to be, how it's defined in the Newtown zoning district, and where it is today. So the next is looking at this overall schedule for the project process. So this it really began with that chapter within the HOCO by Design, making that recommendation to have a task force specific for the review of section 125, the Newtown zoning. But overall, this project really kicked off in May earlier this year. And it began with having one-on-one conversations with each of the task force members, as well as other stakeholders. And that purpose was really to understand where each task force member was coming from, ask for their input to help lead off into some of the visioning exercises, and just understanding kind of the overarching dynamics for this task force. We really kicked off then with the very first task force meeting. There are a total of 10 task force meetings. We really kicked off in June of this year and started moving into that process of the visioning. And so what the visioning is you're just talking about, again, what does that long-term vision look like? And I'll come to that in more detail in a moment. Then we come into the piece set analysis, and I'll describe what that means in a moment as well. But this is really that the identification of the elements and the analysis of should things change? How should they change? What does that look like? And this, of course, is where this public meeting is. It's important to note that right now we're still in this analysis phase. The developing recommendations, that's the next phase of it. And you'll see on the screen with the recommendations that it overlaps with that draft report, because it is very much this iterative process. The task force members will be developing those recommendations and that draft report kind of coinciding. So there's a constant review and iterative process to make sure that document is in fact showing, what's being discussed, how that's being discussed. And you'll see this second public meeting comes right in the middle of that draft report as well, because this is where it is very important to get feedback from everybody and from the whole community into what's going in through this process. As you can see, we are here in the middle of the piece set analysis and really looking to have that final report presentation, which is a documentation of what we've done and the recommendations the task force has developed, having that completed and passed over to the county in May of next year. So then want to get into a little bit of background information for maybe those not as familiar, or just as the reminder of where did this come from? Where did Columbia come from? And it really came from one person's vision, Jim Rouse, as he was identifying this planned community vision, and he established 4 goals for Columbia. And you can read these on the screen: to build a complete city, to respect the land, to provide for the growth of people and to make a profit. And the picture that you see on here is actually a display. It's on the second floor of the American Visionary Arts Museum. They have an entire display about Jim Rouse up there as a master planner, as well as that quote comes from there as well. And it really defines, Columbia and how it was developed, that people are affected by the environment, and talking about making sure that there is a space and a place for everyone to fit in, to feel connected, and to thrive through that environment, and creating that environment for people to do just that. As I mentioned before, with the Newtown Zoning District Code 125, this is the section that this task force is tasked with evaluating and reviewing. It is the classification for Columbia, which is identified as an unincorporated planned community within the county. It was created in 1965 and initially created with the 13,690 acres, which now is 14,272 acres. And the reason why I called these numbers out, if you think back to that density slide where we're talking about a maximum density, maximum number of units per acre, it's really important to understand the number of total acres that we're discussing to best identify what can and can't be done under the current district zoning that's created. And something that is unique with this Newtown zoning district that's different from the other zoning districts throughout the county is that the plans that really talk about that land use and the land use mix, they're regulated at the neighborhood level. And so that's one of those major differences to think about, and think about through the process of any changes, development, redevelopment, et cetera, that's really happening at that neighborhood level. Through what we've been doing, the county has accumulated a lot of information and done a lot of research already with case studies, and JMT as a team has also been looking at them. There are new town districts across the country, but really focusing in on 3 case studies that are in the same general region. So Montgomery Village, Maryland, Greenbelt, Maryland, and Reston, Virginia. Each of these 3 case studies are entities and new town districts that started in relatively the same time frame, the same general sizing, and are experiencing some of the same challenges, or have already experienced some of these challenges, as we're seeing in some of the topics that we're discussing through the task force. And so really looking to use what they've gone through as lessons learned, identify best practices, trying to just see what else is out there and who has already tackled some of these issues or who has preserved certain elements, to bring that back as a knowledge base for the task force members as they're going through the analysis and developing recommendations. So I mentioned before in the process, those first 2 meetings we had were really about visioning. And so it was talking about what's the outcome of all of those meet and greets that we held. What are the top 3 things that people appreciate about Columbia? What are the top concerns people have about Columbia? And then what does the vision, if you had your magic wand 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, what does Columbia look like? And the intent of this is not to develop a brand new vision statement. HOCO by Design has a vision statement for Howard County. Columbia Association has planning documents. There's vision statements for Columbia as it is. The purpose really is develop the vision for the task force members to then take every recommendation and review it and measure it against this vision of what is it that we're doing here with this task force? What are we looking at for the future? So again, just noting where we are in this process, right in the middle of the PSET analysis. So the visioning was completed, and we are looking at that analysis. So really that measurement we're going against. So the vision that was developed is really more of a number of phrases and words coming together of people and community, diversity and inclusivity, open space and green space aid in maintaining the spirit of Columbia, embrace the future while honoring the values that Columbia was based upon, and Columbia is a place that needs to value its uniqueness based on its history. And a lot of this really comes back to what I've heard many times over from different stakeholders, from individuals yesterday at the public meeting, even from as folks were talking during the first kind of half of this meeting. It is that honoring what was built and still being relevant to move forward for the future. So that balance as well of being very proud of having that inclusivity and diversity, and balancing that with built and natural environments. So this is what everything will come back and be measured against as recommendations do get developed. And so now we're within that PSET analysis. So I mentioned I would explain that further. So here is what it stands for. It is preserve, strengthen, enhance, and transform. So our September meeting, which we've already had, the October meeting, which is in 1 week from today, and our November meeting is when we're really taking a look at reviewing these major elements of the zoning code and identifying whether we're going to keep them, whether we need to modify them, or whether we need to transform them. So with the September meeting, we started with looking at what are those major elements? What are the things we really need to start focusing in on? And that list came from the one-on-one meetings with the task force members, came from stakeholder meetings. It also came from different information and collection of information from the county as they've heard from community members of challenges or benefits within the zoning. What we'll be doing is taking each of these major elements, we'll review them, and we are reviewing them individually. So the task force is taking a look at these on a element by element basis to help just organize and structure those discussions. And we're taking those case studies that I mentioned earlier and providing relevant information pertinent to each of these elements that might have already happened within one of those areas and bringing that information to the task force. So the task force can then identify, so what happens next? Do we need to keep it exactly as it is, preserving it? Do we need to strengthen it a little bit? Do we need to enhance or transform it? Those elements will then, once that decision has been made through the analysis, then we'll move into the task force developing recommendations about each of those elements. So there have not been recommendations developed to date. It has simply been an acknowledgement of what needs to stay the same, what needs to change, how does it need to change. And so just to further clarify a little bit, because those terms preserve, strengthen, enhance, transform might mean something a little different as each person reads it. And so wanting to provide that context, so we're all on that same kind of talking from the same background. So preserving is protect and maintain. So preserving what matters most, kind of keeping it as it is. It works well, and we want to maintain what that looks like. Strengthen talks really to the fact of something is working, but maybe the language needs to be strengthened up a little bit, or a little bit more language in there to help ensure that what has already been working can continue to work. Areas to enhance are areas where it might already be working, but we want to enhance it. We want to add some more into it. We really want to enhance what already exists. And then finally, transform. So areas that, things that might be underutilized, they might need to change. They may no longer be relevant because Section 125 in the zoning code, while there have been updates to it, it's largely similar to when it was established, decades ago. And so is it still relevant? Is the terminology still relevant to move forward? And so that's where the transforming might come in. So the key elements, and I'll put all of these up on the screen at once. So the key elements for discussion, this list, as I mentioned, it came from the one-on-one meetings, it came from stakeholder meetings, and it came from different input from community members to the Department of Planning and Zoning. And you'll see the 3 different colors on the screen. The tan brown color represents the topics that were discussed in September at the September meeting. Those in green, this reviewing original petitioner role, looking at the moderate income housing unit regulations, the discussing density caps. This will be the discussion for the October meeting, which again is 1 week from today. And then our meeting following that in November, really looking at some of these elements as well. So look at what does that Newtown district structure look like? Should it change? Is it fine as it is? Does it need to be redefined? Identify what the definition of apartment land use is, and does that function still? Expansion of uses and materials and design guidance in Newtown zoning. So again, this is something to think about of when a lot of this was established. Is it still relevant? Have technologies changed for materials that perhaps there need to be considerations for additional items to be included? And finally, the discussion of with the regulations and processes that are for the Newtown zoning district, should it be simplified? Should it be different? How in evaluating what that looks like and moving forward, is there a recommendation for what that should look like? Ultimately, we really want to hear from you. So I have the QR code up, and this is a survey. This survey really gets into the specific issues and specific elements that are being discussed, because we want this information. We want to hear from as many people as possible. All of this information will be going back to the task force. So this survey doesn't close till November 3rd. We'll have some kind of interim results to begin that thought process at our next meeting. We're really looking to take all of the information that's coming in from the survey results, pass that along so the task force has that information to educate and be educated what the community is thinking, and really have that to identify and aid in developing recommendations. So you are absolutely encouraged. If you have already taken the survey, thank you so much. If you have not, please do so now, and absolutely share this with your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues. Please continue to push this out. We would love to get many, many more respondents to this. I'll keep that up. Oh, and of course, join us at the next public meeting as well in the spring. But I'll keep that survey link up, and that is on the right side of the screen is the survey. So if you have not taken it, please do so. On the left side of your screen is a general comment form. So you're welcome to snap that QR code. It is an open comment. So while the survey really gets into specific issues, the comment form is for any questions or comments or suggestions you have, just kind of the free writing to please fill that out as well and submit that. That also goes back to the task force so that all of this information really helps guide through the analysis component that we're in now, as well as the developing recommendations. So that's the presentation. So thank you again for being here, for listening to the presentation. We'll go back to the QR codes because I think that's the more important slide than simply saying thank you. And at this time, what we want to do is open up. If you have questions or comments, suggestions, you can go ahead and raise your hand or put it into the chat box or raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Sarah and Jeff are kind of monitoring that. And we do certainly want to call on those who are new for the presentation, have joined us now and might not have had a chance to speak during the first portion of this public meeting. So with that, please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. This is now your time. This is also, I know there's a lot of information, and the in-person public meeting was able to go back and look at individual slides and read through them a little bit more in depth, and to have that same experience. If there is a slide that you want me to put on the screen so you can look at it a little bit more in depth, please let us know that as well. Thank you.
All right, seeing a couple hands raised. First, I see Jacob. Oops. Sorry, Jacob, I think we might have hit the button at the same time there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. At the beginning of the presentation, there was a slide that mentioned the Newtown district was intended to be like a self-sustaining type of community or something along those lines.
The slide with Jim Rouse on it as well. Might have gone one too far.
It might have been before that. I think it was almost at the very beginning. So yeah, here with the Calvin Ball's quote,
Yes.
that it's informed by a community first approach.
Mhm.
I was curious if there was some sort of hierarchy that that had either the preferred or required amenities within the zoning district. For example, like proximity to a grocery store or proximity to a park for each of the residential areas, or if that's something that's being considered.
That's a great question. Happy to add on to that. So the zoning district for Newtown's quite specific in its land use mix. So that's typically, Jennifer, if you want to go to the slide on the density table, you can see some of those land uses. That's things like different types of single family, multifamily, employment, industrial is in there as well. It's just not counted in the density, and open space. So that land use mix is regulated as part of the zoning regulations. There is not currently anything in the regulations that speaks to something as specific as like a grocery store, for instance. But one thing we do hear quite consistently from our task force members and from the general community is really valuing that open space. So for Newtown, there's a required minimum of 36% open space across the entire district. And that's something that's really valued. And you can see in Newtown through all the trails and parks and green space amenities that are offered.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see a hand up from Brian.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Just a couple comments. I know, I guess for the task force, even strong planned communities, they'll face external pressures like highway access, regional commuting, etc. So I would suggest that, Columbia prioritizes internal mobility, walk, bike, and minimize the automobile dominant patterns rather than reinforce them. So that was just one of the ideas that I'd like to keep in mind. And I'm not sure how affordability and such is tracked over time, but I think it'd be a good idea to have some built-in metrics and triggers over time so that you can make sure you're monitoring and tracking affordability over time. And I think the last idea I had, or last thought I had was for the zoning guidelines and design guidelines, they should include adaptive reuse language so that you can have like pilot zones and pilot areas or density bonuses for affordable housing, and then build in like a periodic review so you can update that as you're going along. So I think those are my initial thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Brian.
Any other comments or questions? Particular slide?
And while we're waiting for the next comment or question, I am going to go back to the QR code. Just so that really want to hear from everybody. So again, just reiterating, any questions or suggestions, please share them. If there's a slide you would like to go back to, please let us know and we can go back to that. Outside of that, this is your time for questions.
Seeing a couple other hands come in. I'm seeing Joel.
All right, since nobody was saying anything, the density discussion keeps coming up, and as I told the zoning board once, and I think Sharon earlier said it, it's not the density throughout the whole community that's important. It's that it's being concentrated in parts of Harper's Choice and Wildlife, with parts in Newtown and outside of Newtown. To recognize that one of the largest open space areas is, I guess, the wildlife management area next to River Hill and Harper's Choice, which is all that green area on the left. So having all that acreage enabled you to develop more elsewhere. Has any, but DPZ dealt with the fact that one, the utility rights of way are like R20 or R12 running through the town. If they were in Newtown, you could add that density. And if, say, Centennial Park was added to Columbia, Newtown, you get all that acreage. And then we're really having this one, as I said before, you've already carved out downtown, but you could get the density to use elsewhere, but you're still concentrating it. So the discussion of density seems somewhat outdated, because you can, one, as I said, you could solve it by adding all this open space that nobody would care what it's actually zoned. Or you need to address the fact that you're concentrating in certain places and it's becoming a traffic problem on two roads in Harper's Choice, because to get access to 108 by avoiding going through the downtown area. So has that come up?
So the specific, and truly the specific densities in the zoning have not yet come up. That is our topic of discussion for our next meeting, where we'll be getting
I mean,
into
has
that.
it come up with your background research and from DPZ and added to the document binder, I guess? More of a question for DPZ, I guess.
Sure. Some of our previous conversations have talked about looking at densities in specific areas as well. We've heard similar comments in the public meeting yesterday as well, whether to look at density in terms of specific locations or to look at it at a larger scale. So I think that's something that the task force will be discussing at the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll just note too, the 14,272 acres, and I just double checked the math there, that number is only reflective of what single family low, medium apartments, either single family attached, multifamily, employment, and open space. I don't, there could be instances, obviously, of part of those land uses being categorized as such, but being used as right of ways or as utilities. But that just kind of speaks to, are there changes that need to take place in order to kind of make things more reflective? I think we also bring up the topic of open space, credited, non-credited open space as a topic of discussion, and what the task force should be doing on that front to just assess what is currently there. And there have been efforts by the department to try and account for that more accurately.
All right, well, I was referring to the BG right-of-ways in particular. That was part of your explanation, Jeff.
Yeah.
And I guess how it partly, with the redevelopment of Long Reach the first time, the boundary area included the areas outside of Newtown, I believe, in the BG property. And that was an issue in Hickory Ridge that the neighboring parcels in the POR said they didn't want to be in Newtown or in the village center. Boundaries, because it make sense, and I agreed because you can't follow the next steps in the section K being in the boundaries if you're not in Newtown. So that was just part of pointing out that the BG rights of way could be NT, and BG wouldn't care what it was. And the highways as well, I believe, were zoned outside of NT there. Like looking at the map, US 29 is R20. So you could hypothetically make that NT, you get all that density. So that's a silly game to play when the issue is really not the whole 40,000 acres, it's the neighborhood.
Thank you, Joel. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? I see we've had one or two join. If you want to go ahead and raise your hand, and Jennifer, if you want to jump down to the QR codes, just in case anyone's joining, would like to scan to take the survey.
So as there are new folks joining in, potentially the survey QR code is on the right. We do encourage everyone to take that if you haven't already, as well as share that with as many people as possible. We really want a lot of respondents, and the information will be that we're collecting on the very specific issues through that survey is information to go back to help the task force members as well. And then on the left side, it is a general comment form. So as you've had ideas or questions or discussion items for consideration, we did have some even in this call. Both Joel and Brian had provided several. That's another great place to add those to make sure that it's documented and we're hearing from everyone.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm seeing Brian has his hand up.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple more as I was sitting here. I just thought of a couple more. So my wife has a business here, so I was thinking about supporting some of the smart, finding ways to support small businesses with like we already have some flexible storefronts, but just looking to identify reducing permitting friction for local entrepreneurs. If you can, I don't know if you ask them those types of questions to try to figure out how we can get more entrepreneurs going a little quicker. Some of the others, I know we do a best job that we can, but everyone wants to build a new shiny object, but I want to focus on also long-term reinvestment and maintenance of those objects. And so things will fall into disrepair over time. So including that in the plans with going forward, make sure you have some reserves for that. And then anytime there's an opportunity for redevelopment, I think it could be important to use that as an opportunity to make these buildings more greener, more energy efficient, and including those in those designs when those occur. But okay, yeah, I'll stop there. But that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I'll add some of our elements definitely touch on that. Particularly our simplification of some of the regulations and processes looks to how can we make it simpler for businesses and community members to participate and possibly change their final development plans or amend things or navigate the zoning process in general. And also looking at newer alternative materials is definitely something that's included, since a lot of our FDPs could have been developed in 1970, and there's newer materials available on the market today for sure. Anyone else, feel free to raise your hand with any questions or comments. I see Joel.
Since you said that you added some of my comments to your list of things to do or document. Regarding the redevelopment of the village centers, I had a public information request a few years ago that the map for Wild Lake was never shared as zoning regs require, because as I was saying earlier, once you create the boundaries, it becomes an issue for after you do the major redevelopment. Minor redevelopments have steps once they're in the boundaries of the village center. So it wasn't done for Wild Lake to notify all the other property owners. And I guess the same issue with Long Reach, and Long Reach coming up again. So those processes and sharing that part of the complication of the zoning district, I guess something needs to be addressed as well.
Definitely, it's absolutely something we've heard from a lot of our task force members.
Anyway, because I've always thought it should be added to the GIS map, but you haven't ever done that.
Thank you for the comment.
So again, this time is for comments, suggestions, questions, wanting to look at any other slides. I know a few of you have been on here for the duration, so really do appreciate that. And just want to make sure that with our final 13 or so minutes here, that we've taken the opportunity and everybody's had the opportunity to share whatever it is that they would like to share at this time regarding this project and this process. If you have not yet taken the survey, this silent time is a perfect opportunity to take the survey as well.
See, we have a hand up from Joan.
Hi, I am a member of the task force, and I attended last night's meeting, and I've attended this night's meeting. And I want to thank staff and the consultant for having provided this opportunity to hear from the community. I've taken lots of notes, and it's what I have heard has made me think a lot. And so I wanted to thank again those who put this on, as well as those who participated. And I just want everyone to know that we are listening, and we want to hear what you have to say. So send in those comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Joan. With that, wonderful. Oh, I do see a hand raised. Jacob?
Yeah, I was just curious what your biggest complaint with the current language of the zoning is.
That is a very good question. There's, I suppose we've interviewed with many of the task force members, and I think one of the largest things we've heard is that it's hard to follow, particularly with, as you might have heard, everything's regulated at the neighborhood level in Newtown. So everything is regulated not only at the preliminary development plan, the whole Newtown scale, but we have 268 FDPs or final development plans that are kind of at that neighborhood level, that are the regulations that really specify, what land uses you might have, what requirements for parking you might have, or setbacks, or a certain lot design layout setups might be required. And I think one thing we've heard pretty consistently is that that's a very challenging process to follow for someone who is unfamiliar with it. And if a property owner needs to make a change or understand what's allowed on their given property, that can be challenging. A lot of the processes around making any of those changes can be complicated and difficult. Add on if any of the other team members have anything else.
I would just mention that, yeah, there's been, I would say, excuse me, about over the past 2 decades or so, there's been different efforts in the past with different task forces, different groups, different civic associations, Columbia Association. They've all done their own assessment of Newtown. They've done their own public outreach and engagement sessions. They've come out with their own reports as well. And I think we're, it's not necessarily that it's just our critique, it's just what the critiques of what we've been hearing, and what the task force has really been charged with is trying to take into account all these different issues, debate the merits of each one, and then come up with some recommendations.
And
go
ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Jen. Go ahead.
I was just going to reiterate, as Sarah had mentioned, and I'm the one who sat in every single, I facilitated every single meet and greet and stakeholder interview as well. And Sarah really hit that one on the concern of what that process looks like, and what a homeowner versus a developer, it's enough for a developer doing it, but as a homeowner wanting to make a revision and often just not having the resources, the time, the money to be able to sit down and easily follow it. Even there are some wonderful, Howard County has this wonderful brochure online, more of like a 5-pager than a true brochure, but a lot of great information. But that came across from everyone, and through that comment as well was the amount of public meeting and public engagement points within that process. There's many different points wanting to have the engagement from people and hearing about it, but how often and how much time that takes as well. So the complexity of it, the time of it. And then on the flip side, we heard it as a positive from pretty much every single person, but it was also in that make sure we don't lose. And that really came down to the green space and the open space. And I say that as 2 distinct items because they truly are 2 distinct items. So while we heard that coming through from everyone of something everybody really appreciates, but at the same time of whatever it is that's coming through in this evaluation and the recommendations that we're maintaining that quality of life that comes with that green space, that open space, that ability to engage outside as well.
I'm really glad you said that, Jen, because that helps me. I was about to say that the Newtown zone, when it was created, it had 1 developer. It had Rouse. And so it was much simpler for 1 owner to come in and make all of these changes. So now it's it's complex. We currently have 39 zones in the county. I just had to check because I have Planned Howard Academy tomorrow night, so I need to brush up on my my zoning here. But we do, you know, more modern zones exist in the county than this very complicated zone that's kind of been the zone cobbled together sort of over the years. And I will say, you know, there's much to be, there's many benefits out of this. As you know, many of you, if not all of you, live in Columbia and or play or work or go for entertainment. It's a wonderful place. It's this realization that the county certainly needs to kind of look at what are the more modern zones we have? What's this zone have? Where are the complications? How can we, is this still, is much of 128, section 125, sorry, right, 125.
125.
Is that, yeah, 128 would be another zone. Is it still relevant? Is much of what is relevant? And this task force will take that on. And they are going to be looking at all of the implications of the entire zone and presenting to county council their recommendation. And that's how this is going to go.
Thank you all. I see we've got another hand raised from Christian. See, Christian, I sent you a request to unmute, so hopefully you can.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry I'm late. Look, I just jumped on to say that I support this plan, the vision. So if you need more supporters, count me in, right? I think the work that you guys have been doing has been phenomenal. I moved to Maryland from San Francisco because of Columbia, and it was at the time during COVID, so it had just ranked best places to have a family during that time of moving. My wife gave birth, so I had a kid, so it's like, okay, well, let's go to this place. We got here, we bought our home virtually, like literally. We were in San Francisco, we bought our house online. We didn't even come to Columbia. We just read the reviews, we saw what we saw, we loved it, and it has been nothing but an amazing place to have a family, to enjoy those open spaces. So I think this new plan that you guys are working towards, it's the right thing to do. We have to change with the times, and I'm excited and I look forward to it. So just wanted to show my support. And Kristen, I'll be in your class tomorrow, so looking forward to that. But yeah, thank you.
I thought your name looked familiar, but I don't have the list in front of me, so I can't wait to meet you. That's awesome. Thanks for giving us your comments. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you and welcome. You're a few years late, but
So really, as we're coming up to the 2 p.m. hour, are there any last thoughts or comments or questions from anyone? And so thank you everybody for joining in. I've left this screen up. You've already heard me say it a few times, but please do take the online survey. The survey is about specific issues that the task force will be tackling and really wanting to get some of that information from as many community members as possible. So if nothing else, take this QR code, take a picture of it and share it with as many people as you possibly can so that we can have a great representation for that information and really be able to identify some trends with a good number of people having taken that. And of course, on the left side of the screen is the digital comment form. So this is just an open form to add in any thoughts, ideas, questions, anything else that's part of this process for this task to share with us and to share with the task force. So again, thank you everybody for your time today and being a part of this process, and continue to check the website for ongoing project process updates. Have a great afternoon.
thank you all.